Hello, welcome. This is H1. We're going to be running it back with another episode talking about chess knowledge, chess wisdom, and chess understanding again, baby. And you're back here. You're back here to go over the King's Gambit. And yes, we're going to be going over an oldie, a game back in the 1900s with Boris Spassky against Yasser Seirawan. Let's get into it right quick. Let me get this chessboard up. If you don't know what the King's Gambit is, this game started off like this. E4, E5, and then F4 initiates the King's Gambit. What is this opening exactly? It is a very energetic opening. You don't see really top players playing it anymore because it's so divisive, and it has a whole bunch of theory in this opening. And I don't think it is definitely that beneficial for white unless they can memorize all the different lines where you can put more pressure on the opponent. But generally, black is okay in this opening, and especially after the move d5 here. But in this game, we have this move e takes on f4. E takes on f4, the most contentious move that black can do. Challenging white, making sure they know what they're doing in this opening. And let me just show you one tactic that can happen if you're not on your toes. Is if you just do a normal move like knight to c3 here, queen to h4 is damaging. Because if the king moves up, now you can't castle. If g3 happens, you could just take that pawn. And so we're forced to do, after e takes on f4, knight to f3. Knight to f3 in this position. After knight to f3, knight e7, another weird move, but hey, the knight wants to either be guided to like the g6 square to protect this pawn, and basically trying to have white prove their advantage with more activity, because that's why you give away a pawn at the beginning. That's why it's called a King's Gambit. It's not just a regular like King's variation. After knight to e7, d4 in this position, and then we have d5. And when you're playing against a gambit, you want to do moves like this. You want to still try to attack the center. Don't let your opponent get away with certain moves that they shouldn't be, all right? Because once they get more energetic, once they start causing more threats in this position, then that could be bad for us. And yeah, we don't want to be in the back seat when we're playing chess. We want to be the person that is, you know, still trying to control the, we're going to be fighting back. That's basically what we want to do in every chess game. I don't care who you are going against. You always want to be going back, fighting no matter what. Okay. I don't care if they're 7 foot tall. After this move d5, knight to c3 in this position. And then we have this next move here. After knight to c3, d takes on e4. Knight takes on e4, which is very scary. The king is still in the center. There's no pawn on the e file, and the king is on the e file. Very scary. But this opening is actually pretty okay with the white pieces, especially since the king can actually sit on the f2 square, weirdly enough. Now, black did the wrong move here, knight to g6, because they should have did the move knight to d5 here, but I digress. Knight to g6, protect the pawn, and now white is going to have to figure out how to deal with this pawn, or maybe not deal with that pawn. Maybe just keep on developing pieces until they get to the point where they're attacking this king, which is still in the center. I don't know why that king is still in the center. I don't get it either, but you're going to see exactly what happens here. After this move, knight to g6, h4, immediate response, best move here because you are trying to attack the knight with this move h5, and then do bishop takes on f4. How do they respond? Well, they have to do this move like queen to e7. They got to keep on threatening things with moves like this. After queen e7, which is attacking the knight, we have this move king f2. King f2. The first tactic here. Boris Spassky was not playing with his opponent, because after queen takes on e4, you might be thinking, okay, that's a free knight, that's a free pony. We have bishop to b5, checking the king. If c6 happens, what is the best move? If you already seen it, good job. Rook to e1. pinning the queen to the king, and now we get a full queen for a couple pieces, and their king is still in the center. All right. Now, you might be thinking, what if the king goes to d8? The rook can still go to e1. The rook can still go to e1. Because if the queen moves anywhere in this position, we have this fascinating checkmate, rook to e8. Bishop is protecting the rook. The king cannot capture. The king cannot go to d7 because of the bishop. And yes, this is checkmate in the middle of the board. So they would have to give away the queen no matter what. All right, there is no way to get out of this. And that's why taking that knight on e4 was always a trap. It was always a trap. Anyway, after this move, king to f2. After this move, king to f2. Bishop to g4, not the best move, but you know, the game continues because these are both top grandmasters. I think they was both probably top 10 at this point, but I could be wrong too. h5, attacking a knight. Now the knight has to go somewhere, and once that knight leaves, white is going to be picking up that pawn. And just notice that the same tactics still applies if this queen wants to take on e4, even at this moment. Now, after bishop to g4, h5, knight to h4, putting more pressure on the opponent here, and then we have bishop takes on f4. Now, white's pieces are very energetic. They only need a few more moves like bishop d3, queen d2, rook e1, and then white's position is pretty safe. Black's position, not so much. It's kind of uncoordinated. There's a lot of pieces being attacked in this situation, so black is going to have to like capture some pieces, but even after capturing, they're going to have to deal with this bishop on f8 that is stuck behind this queen. This knight still has to develop. This king is still in the center. There is actually a lot of problems with the black pieces. That's something that you're going to have to know when you're playing your own game too, is that your opponent has to deal with their problems. Of course, you got to deal with yours, and it's actually very easy just to think about our problems. But notice what our opponent has to deal with in their position. Notice that our opponent isn't perfect, and yeah, they're going to make mistakes. Knight to h4, bishop takes on f4, knight to c6. Not the best move. And then we have this move of bishop to b5. Not the best move, but hey, the game still continues. The game still continues. After bishop to b5, pinning the knight to the king, black hurry up in queenside castle. And most of the time you don't want to give your opponent the option to double up your pawns. But when you're at a really strong level, you realize when you are in trouble. And when you realize that, you sacrifice some types of advantages. Like for example, a pawn structure advantage. In order for you to get your king into safety and off of the e-file, which is it's a lot more dangerous if you just would have kept the king there, maybe move the queen, bishop e7. That would have took too many moves where black had to sacrifice probably some pieces in that situation if they're doing that many moves to try to castle king side here. After bishop takes on c6, b takes on c6, queen d3, finally protecting that knight on the e4 square and threatening this check on a6 since the king wanted to queenside castle. What happens in that scenario? Okay, knight takes on f3. They had to like capture this piece sometime. We have g takes on f3, and then a bishop to f5. After bishop to f5, which that makes sense because they want to keep the double fianchetto, which the double fianchetto is the best coordination of minor pieces. If you don't know what the minor pieces are on a chessboard, for all the beginners that's watching this video, it is the knights, the bishops only, not the rooks, not the queens, not the pawns, just the knights and the bishops. And the major pieces in chess is the queens and the rooks on the board. Now, after this move, bishop to f5, like I said before, we have this check on a6. And not only this check, king b8, we have this powerful knight on this c5 square. On this c5 square. Looks very ugly. It doesn't look pretty for black. it seems like black is going to be losing in the next few moves if they cannot guard this move, queen to b7. But gladly, they have this move like bishop to c8 to guard the square on b7. The king still have holes, and they are going to have to deal with those weaknesses, those weak squares, for the rest of the game. After queen takes on c6, rook takes on d4, attacking the bishop, and then we have this next move, rook a to e1. And when we are developing pieces, the best moves are usually the moves that threatens another piece or captures or checks. Those are the forcing moves that you have to keep in mind in chess in order for you to play grandmaster moves. Because if you would have just did a regular move like rook to f1 or even like rook to d1, I guess that would be attacking a piece. But if we're not threatening, keeping an initiative, then that gives our opponent the chance to threaten our pieces. And then we're gonna have to get into a cycle of responding to every single threat that they are doing. After rook a to e1, rook a to e1, rook takes on f4, and then black sacrificed the queen. Black sacrificed the queen in this position. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, not yet. They didn't sacrifice the queen yet. First, white did this move, queen to b5, king a8, and then we have this move, queen c6. Just repeating moves. I'm guessing that this was a classical chess match where if you hit 40 moves, you can get time. And this is like a classic thing that grandmasters do all the time just to keep the opponent on their toes. But after queen b5, queen c6, eventually rook takes on e7. Black had to sacrifice their queen so that they can get advantage. Because if they would have allowed that rook to capture the e file, you never know what that rook was going to do. It's probably most likely that rook was going to rook lift onto the b3 square, attacking the king, and then the game would have quickly been over. All right, so black, this was probably black's only choice to keep the game going and not lose in a timely manner. After rook takes on e7, a bishop takes on e7, and then we have this next move, rook to d1. Rook to d1, rook to d1, rook to f6, oh, queen d7, check in this position, which is a fork at the same time. And the only move that white can do is bishop takes on d7. And then we have this next move, queen takes on d7. If they would have taken with rook, rook takes on c6. We don't want that to happen. And we have a rook to d8. Only move here, only good move, queen b5, checking the king. And if they would have just went to a regular square, which wasn't a check, black could have taken this rook on the d1 square. Pretty bad. We don't want to give away pieces when we are in the winning position. So always think, don't underestimate the opponent just because they do not have a queen. Now, king c8, and then rook takes on d8. And yeah, he just went on to win this game. Just remember that this game started out with a king's gambit. And yeah, white did get very active pieces. So sometimes this opening can be very good for you, especially when the opponent doesn't know what to do. And then sometimes it could backfire if your opponent knows more about the opening than you. Rook takes on d8, bishop takes on d8, queen to a4, g5 in this position, queen takes on a7, take these pieces. White pretty much just went on to win the game, rook to f4. And even in this position, white is going to have to like force the win here. White is only up, let me see, if I'm counting all the material, okay, bishop rook, that's 8 points. So queen, 9 points. The pawns, black has 4 pawns, white has 5 pawns. So white is only up 2 points. It's not a huge lead, so we're gonna have to make more weaknesses into the opponent camp so that they know that they are losing. After queen to a6, checking the king moves to b8, queen goes to d3 in this position, centralizing the queen. And then we have this move, a bishop to e7, because that queen was not only being centralized, but attacked the bishop on the d8 square. And then we have this next move, queen takes on h7. That's when you realize, oh, queen d3 was a fork. And one good thing that you should think about when you're playing the game of chess is forks, especially if you have a powerful queen and your opponent doesn't. And all of your opponent's pieces are pretty much easy pickings, all right? After queen takes on h7, g4, some tactics are going on here. What is white gonna do about this? Easy enough. King g3 solves that problem because if rook takes on f3, king takes on g4, and there's no way to stop this h-pawn. And if they stop this h-pawn, then we have this a-pawn that can run up. Those are our two passed pawns that white should be focusing on. And if rook just goes to like b4 or a4, then we could just capture that pawn or just push up the h-pawn. There is no way that white was gonna ever lose this, especially since they are a very popular grandmaster. And yeah, very interesting game that every player should keep in mind, especially if you are trying to play the King's Gambit. Now, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Keep on fighting to the end, staying focused in chess. And my last video didn't get a lot of likes. Can you like this video if you got to the end? I'm giving out free knowledge. I do this for you.